Hello.
Hello.
Some women stay in lives that stopped fitting themselves years ago because survival once depended on staying. We have to stay agreeable, we're staying needed, we're staying chosen, staying loyal, but it's all of these versions of themselves that were built inside of somebody else's like weather station. And so today's word of the week is starting over. I'm joined by Diane Cole for a conversation about grief, trauma bonds, healthy love, emotional loyalty, and what happens when women realize that life that once saved them may also be the thing that's keeping them small now. So, this is the feral era for women over 40, where high achieving women come to stop the origami folding themselves into smaller, quieter versions of who they are just to make everybody else comfortable. And Diane, I keep thinking about how many women are functioning beautifully while internally they're standing kind of like in an emotional clearance aisle. And and I'm just so glad that you're here so that we can kind of like look into this stuff. So welcome.
Can't wait. Thank you. Happy to be
Yeah.
here.
Yeah. So Diane, when we first met, it was during one of my summits, and you came on about that, and you had your book had just come out. For people who you are new to, can you just tell us a little bit about the work you do and your book, and maybe that retreat that I saw that you have coming up this fall?
Sure. Yeah, thank you. I'm Diane Cole. I'm a trauma therapist by trade. I specialize in trauma recovery in general, but specifically relationship trauma. And through my work with women and men that have relationship trauma, I have really come to understand how to begin again, manifest a new life after being impacted by relationship trauma. And so I did write a book called Heart Buttons, The Art and Science of Healing a Broken Heart or something along the lines with trauma informed manifestation. And it's about what relationship trauma is, what love wounds are, how they impact the development of a manifestation mind, and then how to heal with psychological but also spiritual techniques in order to reclaim your manifestation mind and reclaim that new beginning that people may want
Mm.
after that.
And when you
So I
say love, like, are you talking just romantic relationships, or could this also be friends and parental relationships and familiar relationships and boss
All pivotal.
relationships? Okay,
Yes, all pivotal
perfect.
relationships. I've done this work with people about their employers as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. So all pivotal relationships for sure, especially parental relationships. Woof.
Woo, doggy.
The
So,
original.
and then
Yes.
I just saw that you're planning a retreat for the fall. So that's something new that I was excited to learn about. Where's that going to take place?
Yes. So that is going to be the weekend before Thanksgiving weekend in
Okay.
November. And it's just outside of Salem in this beautiful, epic mansion farmhouse where
Mm.
women are going to come together and do group hypnosis, breath work, and do reclamation ceremonies together
Mm.
for trauma informed manifestation for that new beginning at the end of the year. We can't
Yeah.
wait.
How many spots do you have for that?
So there are about 8 spots available, and we only
Okay.
have 4 spots left.
Okay. Well,
Yeah.
perfect. Well, and if people are interested in any of that, they can find you on the interwebs and send you messages
Yes.
on LinkedIn or Facebook.
Well, not LinkedIn, but Facebook and Instagram. Yeah.
Okay,
Mhm.
perfect. So back to the stuff here. You chose starting over as your word. So why starting over and why does beginning again feel so much more terrifying to women over 40 specifically?
Well, when you said, "Oh, so here's the options," and one of them was starting over, and I was like, starting over is my bread and butter. That is what I help people do
Mm.
all the time.
Mhm.
I could talk about this for days. I know we don't have days, but I could talk about it for days. Um, it's been my life's work to help people start over, whether it's a horrific, terrible, traumatic day, whether
Mhm.
it is a traumatic loss or a traumatic relationship that they're trying to recover from, all different ways of starting over. And I think that the ability to start over is truly a gift that we give to ourselves, right? Because
Mhm.
the ability to be flexible and become different versions of ourselves is the foundation of resiliency,
Mhm.
in my humble opinion.
Yeah. And when I think about starting over, I think that we are always in cycles of rediscovery. And so I think what scares people is they often think they have to jump to a whole new like cycle. Whereas if you
Right.
collect one or two new threads of the new favorite version of you, then like the evolution just starts to change over time. And maybe that doesn't have to be so scary.
Yes, I totally agree. Having flexibility of the in the process of living and becoming is
Hmm.
so important and so helpful. And I do understand that there's so much comfort in having a I am me, and this is a consistent me.
Yeah.
But also, is it really realistic? You know, even if you look at scientifically the makeup of our bodies, every cell in our bodies is ever changing. And they say
Mm,
that every 7 years, I think that's about it, that every single cell in our body is completely different. You know, so
mm,
even on a physiological level, we're in a constant state of change. The Buddhists have a concept of no self, which means that there is no set you or no set Kirsten or no set Barbara, right? That we are constantly changing and evolving.
mm.
And what I have discovered is when people become more comfortable with that, it actually becomes really exciting and interesting, like
Yeah.
rediscovering who they are today.
Yeah. I do a lot of work with just challenging the stories that we tell ourselves. And that makes me, like for people who aren't familiar with that work, that the concept of that our thoughts and feelings are just stories can be kind of offensive. Like, no, those are facts, that this is what everybody thinks about me, that this is and so challenging those is like just stories. For me, it helps me stay emotionally neutral. It helps me think, okay, I have more flexibility because I can just write a new ending, and it helps to give myself the gift of being creative and figuring out how to embrace parts of my world that just feel better. So,
Yeah, yeah. I think one interesting way to help people with that is there are stories and there are beliefs and there are things that happen, but perhaps it's our relationship to that that changes over
mhm,
time, you know.
yeah,
Like for me, like, speaking of, we were talking about driving before we logged in,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
And so I had mentioned, oh, I have been in a lot of car accidents, some that other people caused, some that unfortunately I did, And so my relationship to being a victim of a car accident, for example, one that, I didn't
mhm,
see coming and was, very difficult. So my relationship to that event changes over time.
mm,
So whereas like the day after the event, my relationship is not the same as it is now,
thank
25
goodness.
years later,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah.
Mhm.
So when we talk about starting over, what what part of it has actually nothing to do with courage? Like maybe it's like more grief?
Yeah, yeah. I think that grief is honestly the secret ingredient because if we stay committed to one specific thing, right?
Mhm.
We're like, well, this is what I chose, so I'm going to see it out no matter what, right?
Yep.
Then uh, starting over often is I wish that life was like that, the way that I
Mhm.
wanted it to be and the way that I was planning, but I see that it's not that way. And so grief for what you wanted to be is
Mhm.
hugely important. And you can grieve all kinds of things. A lot of people think that grief is only reserved for the loss of people, but it is not. It is the loss
Mhm.
of all of the things. Definitely the life you thought you were going to have if it's
Yeah.
fundamentally altered in some way.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that strikes true for me with the work that I do with the queer community because as somebody who works with a lot of transgender people, often their parents have grief about the vision that they had envisioned for their own child, of what that was going to look like. And yet, the challenge is not that, you aren't allowed that process or whatever. It's just not your kid's job to like walk with you in that grief because for them they are finally home, they are authentic, they are in alignment, and it's a very different process, and it really should be about them. And so trying to work on that. So but speaking of like parents or romantic or whatever, if we talk about like healthy love specifically, then like if your nervous system is used to it only being where you're earning love versus it just being a gift. Like, what does healthy love look like? What does it feel like? Like, what are the signs that you know that you should be looking for? That be like, oh, this, because right, because if it's different, your body can also be like, bad, bad, get away, it's bad. And so part of it is looking for like clues of no, this is the way it's actually supposed to be, without like sabotaging that or destroying that.
Yeah, for somebody who was taught and having to earn love was normalized, I
Hmm.
would say for that person, feeling like they have to do X, Y, or Z in order to
Hmm.
maintain the relationship, right? That would be the red
Yeah.
flag thing.
Okay.
But if they have someone who is not expecting their partner to be performative or to overfunction for them, if they find themselves with a partner like that, or a friend like that, or an employer like that, right? Then
Fill in the blank. Fill in the blank. Fill in the blank. Yeah.
because I really want people to see like these parallels in their lives,
Yeah.
across the board, right? But if they find themselves with someone that is not expecting them to overfunction in order
Hmm.
to be loved, then your nervous system will spike up because it will feel perhaps like something is amiss, something is wrong.
Mm.
I should be doing X, Y, and Z. And even if intellectually you know that you don't have to overfunction in order to be loved, your subconscious might have neurocircuitry because of having that be normalized for you for so long. So,
Hmm.
for example, if people had parents where they had to earn love by being a good girl or a good boy, and then they were in a relationship where they were expected to overfunction for their partner in order
Sure.
to earn love and admiration, then they may have decades of neurocircuitry in their subconscious about that. And when I say that, do not be scared, anybody that may be listening,
I can't
because
help it. My neurocircuitry says so.
you can change your neurocircuitry. And that is the beauty of an ever changing brain and discovering new
Mm.
versions of ourselves throughout our whole life cycle. And
Yes.
thanks to neuroplasticity, we know that the brain is always, always, always changing. And so when you put some attention to it and do some mindful awareness to it and really encourage yourself repetitively to see things differently and
Mm.
to move into that new version of you, you really can change the underlying neurocircuitry. And then what you intellectually think will match up with how you feel in your soul. And then you feel more comfortable with people that don't want you to overperform for them.
So, how was there a moment in healing when women realized that they were never actually too much and that they were just like chronically under-nurtured?
Yeah, I think, that is one of the love wounds, but there's so much about diversity. So there's people who were programmed to believe that they were too much, right? That they required too
Yeah.
much of people. They're too sensitive, they're too loud, they're too needy, whatever it is. There's also people out there that think that they're ghosts because what their programming was, I'm not even paying attention to you at all.
Mm.
And so, but for sure, if someone has a love wound where they were the modeling was that they're too much and too needy,
Hmm.
then certainly part of the process would be to see that they have needs and they have a right to have expectations and they have a right to be emotionally attuned by the important people in their lives.
Yeah. So what's the sneakiest way trauma keeps women emotionally loyal to people that hurt them?
What's been normalized for them,
Mm.
for sure, because it's so quiet. When something is normalized, a role, over functioning, being invisible, having to be performative, when something like that is normalized in someone's life during childhood, and certainly, definitely, if it happens from childhood through adulthood, there's a
Hmm.
ton, again, speaking of that neurocircuitry, there's a ton of neurocircuitry that keeps that machine going,
Mm.
right? And keeps you in this role and you might not even realize how damaging it is for you because it's just what you know.
Yeah. Mm. What's a great place to start?
If you feel like you have a loved wound that you want to change, you
Yeah.
mean? Yeah. I would say like definitely thinking about what would my loved wound be? I think You don't need to know exactly what happened to you in order to heal and transform, but it does help if you're able to identify it. So,
Mhm.
what would my love wound be? Was I invisible? Was I told that I was too much? Right? Was I always overperforming? So, and of course, there could be even more. Shameless plug, my book has a lot of that whole chapter on love wounds if you want to learn about that.
Yeah, it should be shameless because this is a gift, right? We're helping people step into a favorite version of themselves, and we can't do that unless we can like talk about it, acknowledge it, find these
Right,
patterns, you know.
right.
And I, to your point earlier, I love the concept of like once you start seeing it in one relationship, that it's easier to kind of see how that plays out in the other
Yes.
relationships in our world.
Yes, it tends to be like, of course, with our romantic partners, our parents, our very close friends, our kids, we can see it there, but these patterns also persist as like a relational pattern too with people
Mm,
outside of those pivotal relationships. So, looking at what love wound did I experience? How does it show up in my life? What does it sound like? What does it feel like? What is my body language? How does my body feel when I'm in that? And then putting some mindful awareness of when you're there and helping yourself to unravel from it, whether it's in your thoughts, whether it's a power color that you think of and you put it in
mm,
your heart chakra and you breathe that power color literally into your soul, whether
mhm.
it's thinking about something that's uplifting, certainly, in a clinical lens, if you're going to get therapy for this, brain spotting, somatic experiencing, IFS, EMDR, all of these are amazing ways
A,
to
B,
heal
C,
love
D, E,
wound.
F. Yeah.
All the acronyms, we love our
Yeah.
acronyms in psychology, but all of those are somatic and neurological techniques to help you change that neurocircuitry that you might have from these love wounds and rewire them and create new neurocircuitry to match the amazing life that you're trying to create
Mm,
without having chains to these loved wounds from the past.
yeah. You mentioned how you want to pay attention to how it feels in your body, but for a lot of the women that I work with, like there's a strong disconnect between that reality. How does that feel? I do not know. Like it isn't like that they're avoiding, like they literally have just shut down that part and are in more robot mode. What are some of the ways that people can start to kind of come home to themselves so that they can even notice those patterns or identify those feelings or like when they're just kind of numb.
I always tell people just start where you can. If
Yeah.
you can only know like the behaviors and the thoughts only, I mean that's a big feat in and of itself. Start there. The process unravels and exposes things over time. And the more that you are emotionally attuning to yourself, the more of
Mm,
yourself will be revealed back to you. So if you give it time and you don't try to rush the process, that person that might not be able to identify a cinching in the stomach, for example, or a tenseness in the neck and shoulders, maybe down the
mm,
road of this mindful awareness and emotionally attuning to themselves, then they actually can see that layer of it, right? So I would say, like, trust in the process of your own self discovery. Do as much as you can, as often as you can, and let that be enough. Because
mhm.
it doesn't, it, how do I want to say, like, you don't have to rush to be able to do or know all the things. There's discovery in unraveling the layers. So, and also, if someone hasn't been encouraged at all to emotionally tune to themselves,
Yeah.
they will have to learn how to do that. And so it makes sense that they would have the block to
Yeah.
identifying the physical feelings. Am I making
Yeah.
sense?
Yeah, it totally makes sense.
Okay.
And then to that degree, it kind of makes me think like part of it is when we think about like we talk about how if life were on a scale of like 1 to 10 and people who are at a 3 are willing to like move heaven and earth to make shit happen, like they're just in such pain or discomfort or misery or whatever. But for the people who that I work a lot with, they're floating in this 6 or 7 life. And so then sometimes shooting for the 10 feels greedy, it feels audacious, it feels selfish. And so part of I think what a lot of people where they get that stuck place is just, you know, how do I how do I see myself as being worth fighting for that extra gap, like for that 10 life, and so if you only think that your world should be at a 7 and that should be happy, then you really would kind of we self-sabotage. We get in our own way. We set our own limitations. And so I guess some of the questions that I'm thinking about as you're talking is like, how do we keep that funnel open so that we're willing to just keep striving for more alignment, more joy, more love?
Right. And that's, and again, like I can't stress enough that you don't have to get all the answers from your past to figure out what to do. Because I think sometimes people get stuck in that place because sometimes we just can't identify that one thing that happened in a 3-minute period when you were 3 years old that led to this. Like sometimes we can't, you know? But for that person, what I would say is, hey, how do you think you came to believe that a 10 out of
Mm,
10 life is inaccessible to you? Right?
yeah.
And so listening to their story about that, like
Mm,
who in your life um said that that wasn't available? Was there anyone who did? And if they don't have any real world examples, then let's go to characters in books and movies. Like, is there an
mm,
example of someone, a character, real or imagined, that
mm,
definitely would encourage you through their example that you have a right to a 10 out of
yeah.
10 life, right?
Mm,
And then we start playing around with the feelings, with the thoughts, with the movements, with,
mm,
how do we get you there? And a lot of that would be, how does this person's nervous system respond? So I mentioned a lot of things like, chakra work and cognitive things and things in the body. And so getting to know someone's nervous system and what they respond to, how they access safety specifically for them, is a really good way to have them look at how their programming led them astray, and then
mhm,
how to soothe their nervous system in order to welcome in that new
mm,
belief system with a regulated nervous system that's blocking it from
yeah.
permeating.
And if we think of things in terms of blocking it, that implies then that there's a person of us that we actually already know, and that all we're doing is coming home to ourselves. Like, if we can
I
remove those layers,
yes.
like, it really is
Yeah.
just about, Michael McRae talks about, like, cleaning the mirror, that it isn't that the reflection is bad, it's just the mirror's dirty, and so if we can just clean off that mirror, then we can actually, stop negotiating the parts of ourselves that we actually already know.
I believe wholeheartedly that our default is abundance and
Mm,
interconnectivity. I mean, in our bones are the same elements that are found in the stars,
yeah,
right? It's like the
mm,
human stuff that gets us away from our true nature. So
yeah,
I 100% am in
yeah,
agreement with what you're saying.
yeah. Because not every life like falls apart in flames. Like some of it, it's just where we stop kind of feeling alive. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yes.
Well, huge thanks to Diane Cole for this conversation and reminding women that healing is not becoming smaller, quieter, easier, or more convenient for other people. Come back next week for another fast, fun, furiously conversation about becoming more ourselves on purpose. And until then, stop abandoning yourself just because other people got comfortable with your exhaustion. So, thank you, Diane.
Thank you.